الحمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على النبي المصطفى وعلى آله وصحبه ومن وفى ووفى. أما بعد. Last time we talked about, uh, of course, Imam al-Ghazali's categorizations of seekers of the truth. Imam al-Ghazali basically categorizes uh, the seekers of truth within the Muslim community, within the Muslim society, especially the intellectual society, to be exact. So because those are the ones that are seeking the truth. So he categorizes them to four. You have the mutakallimin, the kalamites, and people of kalam, which we defined last time, and Imam al-Ghazali himself defined very well. And he said that, the people of kalam, were basically concerned with, in a way, defending the aqidah of the ummah, protecting the aqidah, arguing for the aqidah and against, all types of misconceptions and all types of ideologies and philosophies that did not belong to what they call the aqidah, or the Islamic aqidah, the Islamic creed. So they were basically concerned with, arguing for, the aqidah, but against other ideologies. And then you have the Batinites. So for Imam al-Ghazali, the Batinites, of course, when we're talking about Batinites, we're talking about many subsects, because as we shall see, inshallah, because we have the Ismailites, you have the Karameshins, and and you have the Alawites, you have the the Nusayris. So all these are subsects of al-Batiniya. Batiniya basically is a sect that based their philosophy on esotericism, and allegorical interpretation of the Quran. For them, Quran cannot be understood, exoterically. It has to be understood esoterically. There is something hidden that not everyone knows. And therefore, those who were entitled to know this kind of knowledge of the Prophet, and after the Prophet passed away, he passed it down to Ali, and then Ali passed it down to his sons and grandsons, and so on and so forth. So it's a secret knowledge. It's an esoteric knowledge, and no one apart from the Imam knows it. But the Imam will, of course, empower, of course, some of the, even within these sects, you have differences. People that say, okay, we have to wait for the Imam to come, and some will say, no, the, you know, I mean, the Imam can be in the form of someone who lives among us now, who is given the authority to go and interpret the Quran and Revelation. So, so Imam Ghazali said that these are the, you have the Mutakallimin, and you have the Batinites, and now you have the philosophers at the time. When what he meant by the philosophers here, though he is also criticizing Aristotle philosophy, but he primarily, uh, you know, he primarily has a goal at at Ibn Sina and Farabi. So when you say al-falasifa, I mean that the Muslim philosophers at the time. And yeah, and finally this the Sufi group. So the Sufi group also are among the seekers of the truth. So last time we talked briefly about Ilm al-Kalam, and Imam al-Ghazali set the objective of Ilm al-Kalam and defines Ilm al-Kalam very clearly, where he said that Ilm al-Kalam is a science that is meant to, to defend and argue for the aqidah of Ahl al-Jama'ah, yeah, and defend them against, misconception, against innovation, bid'ah, and so, they came up with a way of how to go about, arguing for Islam. Of course, the principles of Ilm al-Kalam, though there is some elements of a logic in it, to be exact syllogism, but you could see that it was derived also from the Quran and the Sunnah. Yeah, there is some sort of element of it. So that's why it's Ilm al-Kalam. That's why it stands out of the crowd of logic in the full sense that it's not totally 100% logic. There's partly some Quranic origin to it, because when you read Quran, there's some sort of argumentation sometimes that take place, and we have many stories related, proving the oneness of Allah. For example, لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا. This is in a way negating contradiction, and because if you have two gods, running this world, then there will be a problem one day, because one would decide to do something and the other would, say, no, don't do it. So there will be clash, and then there will be a problem. So all these are Quranic, logic, if I may put it that way. So Ilm al-Kalam is not purely, as we may think, it's not only something that is derived from the Greek philosophy, Aristotle syllogism, but it's rather a science, on its own right. Yeah. So last time we talked about it, and Imam al-Ghazali defined it very well and defined the objective very well. So today we're going to talk about the second classification of the seekers of knowledge. Among them is, basically the philosophers. Yeah. To be exact, the Muslim philosophers. Yeah. Because Imam al-Ghazali here is not really, even though, in the definition, he would talk about philosophy in general, but he is really having a go at Ibn Sina and Farabi per se, the Muslim philosophers, yeah, who were so obsessed by Aristotelian philosophy. So he said, al-falsafa, the philosophy. So now he's going to talk about philosophy. What is philosophy? Because first, before you criticize the philosophers, you have to make people understand what philosophy is all about. And Imam al-Ghazali, by the way, has a brilliant book where he really elaborates, philosophy. He defines philosophy according to the philosophers, and also, in a way, set their objectives and categorize the kind of the branches of philosophy, which one is good, which one is bad, which one we as Muslims should benefit from, and which one we shouldn't. And actually, this is, Maqasid al-Falasifa. If you read Maqasid al-Falasifa, it's all about defining philosophy, setting the objective of philosophy, categorizing the branches of philosophy. Yeah. And then he wrote another book entitled Tahafut al-Falasifa. Yeah, and the inconsistency of the philosophers, whereby, he was trying to, in a way, I will say, stream out what is good from what is not good, and, pass some judgment on philosophy and all this. So Imam al-Ghazali is not refuting philosophy as a discipline, as many people may think, but rather he's got problem with uh, Aristotelian metaphysics, So this is his problem. So he doesn't have problem with, for example, logic. He may not have problem, with some of the ethics to some extent, and epistemology as far as logic is concerned. But his problem was, with their metaphysics. Yeah. And yeah, so here Imam al-Ghazali is going briefly to, to define philosophy and set the objectives of philosophy. Yeah. أحاصيلها, so bottom line, so meaning of philosophy. So Imam al-Ghazali says أحاصيلها, meaning we are going to talk about the objectives of philosophy. So أحاصيلها means the objectives. Yeah. ما يذم منها وما لا يذم, what is praiseworthy. So, Imam al-Ghazali, we're going to talk about what is praiseworthy about philosophy from what is, blameworthy. وما يكفر فيه قائله, and also in instance where a statement can be deemed or treated as kufr, and the one that is, a statement that is cannot be deemed as kufr, and one that can be deemed as bid'ah, innovation, and one that cannot be deemed as so. And also, this exposition includes explaining what they have, meaning the philosophers, what they have appropriated. Appropriated means they have taken from the people of truth. So because they have appropriated, some statesmen from other people into their, system. وَمَا مَزَجُوهُ بِكَلَامِهِمْ, and also this exposition will explain and will show and reveal and display what they have, mixed with the falsehood, batilihim. And also the exposition will explain how, this has caused some sort of contempt and dislike, in the hearts of the people. من ذلك الحق, so making people turning away from the haqq. And how we can, وكيفية استخلاص صراف الحقائق الحق الخالص من الزيف والبهرج من جملة كلامه, and how we can, differentiate what is falsehood from what is, truth, from what is true, from the statesman. Yeah. Basically, he's saying that this exposition is going to not only define what philosophy is and set what the goals of philosophy is, but it's also going to tell you what is good about it from what is bad. What sort of statesman, philosophical statesman that can be deemed as kufr, and what can be deemed as bid'ah, and also some statesmen that they have appropriated, they have taken, they have plagiarized, and but but claiming it is theirs, they have plagiarized some of the statesmen, from some scholars, claiming that it is their own statesmen, and also what they have mixed, وَمَا مَزَجُوهُ بِكَلَامِهِ, you know, and what they have mixed, you know, taken from somewhere, plagiarized, appropriated in order to promote their falsehood. So this exposition is all to show you all, you know, all this, and how this, you know, by mixing what is truth with what is falsehood, you know, has led to, you know, has caused some sort of contempt and dislike, you know, from the people against the truth, because people will say, okay, if this is the truth, then it's problematic. So, you know, they meant it actually, you know, mixing falsehood and, you know, with truth, so that they can turn people away from the haqq. And Imam al-Ghazali, this exposition is meant to show all this. ثم إني ابتدأت, after this, you know, introduction or abstract, if you may put it, you know, because al-falsafa, this is an exposition of philosophy. Yeah, so the goals, what is good about it, what is bad about it, what can be deemed as kufr and what can be deemed as innovation, and what are the statements that have been appropriated and plagiarized by the philosophers from others, from Ahlul Haq, and in order to promote their own falsehood, you know, and how this led many people to turn away from Haq, understand? So he will, you know, highlight that in the following lines. ثم إني ابتدأت. So Imam al-Ghazali is talking now, is talking about himself. ثم إني ابتدأت. Then I have started, you know, after, you know, addressing the issue of kalam, and after talking about kalam, elaborating on kalam, بعلم الفلسفة, with philosophy. Yeah. So he has classified, you know, the seekers of the truth into four. You know, and he talked about ilm al-kalam and the kalamis. So now he's going to talk about philosophy and the philosophers. وعلمت يقينا, so starting from philosophy, I knew deeply يقينا أنه لا يقف على فساد نوع من العلوم من لا يقف على منتهى ذلك العلم. And I knew deeply that no one can come to discover the falsehood and the inconsistencies of any science, absolutely, unless they have command of it, unless they have, you know, dived deeply, you know, into that knowledge. So when I knew that, so I knew it deeply. So you cannot really pinpoint the falsehood and the fallacy, the inconsistencies of a discipline, of a science, unless you have a very solid command of that science. Yeah. Hatta yusawiya. So not only this, you have to be equal. You have to reach the level in that specific science, in that specific discipline, until you become equal to the most knowledgeable among them in that discipline. You know, you have to be equal to the most knowledgeable person in that specific branch of knowledge. So in order for you to criticize, you know, Imam al-Ghazali is setting a very interesting and a very guiding rule here, very important, meaning that you can't criticize a certain discipline unless you are well grounded in that specific discipline. Yeah. So until so you not only become well-grounded, but you also need to reach a level where you equal the most knowledgeable person in that field. ثم يزيد عليه, even more, even you can, excel and stand out of, this equal. ويجاوز درجته, and go beyond even, his degree. فيطلع على ما لم يطلع عليه صاحب العلم. So you go beyond that to discover things that the most knowledgeable person in that discipline, has no knowledge about, has no clue about. So صاحب العلم أيوة من غوره وغائلته. So you have to know about the problems around that, surrounding that knowledge. You have to know the intricacies of that knowledge. وَإِذَاكَ يُمْكِنُ أَنْ يَكُونَ مَا يَدَّعِيهِ مِنْ فَسَادِهِ حَقًّا. If you reach that level, then what you claim to be falsehood in that, or inconsistencies or fallacies in that specific knowledge, can be acceptable. So if you really want to criticize a certain discipline, you have to show your groundness, your command over that knowledge first. You have to reach a level where you equal the people in the field, or even better, even more knowledgeable than the people in the field. Then when you criticize, then when you pinpoint a problem, or inconsistencies or policies about this specific discipline, then you become rightly so. Understand? ولم أرى أحدا من علماء الإسلام صرف عنايته وهمته إلى ذلك. And I have not seen, of course, Imam al-Ghazali is talking about his time. ولم أرى أحدا, and I did not see من علماء الإسلام, from the scholars of Islam, a person who really gave attention and effort to studying philosophy. Meaning that at his time, Imam al-Ghazali concluded, through, of course, through reading, through reading literature review at a time, and he did not come across a single Muslim scholar that was so concerned with philosophy, a Muslim that was really, doing some efforts to explain and elaborate on philosophy for people to know what philosophy is all about. So وَلَمْ يَكُنْ فِي كُتُبِ الْمُتَكَلِّمِينَ مِنْ كَلَامِهِمْ. And even I looked into the writings of the mutakallimin, but couldn't find any trace of philosophy. حيث اشتغلوا بالرد عليهم, even though the mutakallimin, meaning the people of kalam, even though they refuted the philosophers, but I couldn't find anything related to their science in their books. So he wanted to say, how come you, people of kalam, can refute philosophy without even knowing philosophy, without stating the very principles of the philosophers. You need to state their principle first, what they believe, and then you refute them. So Imam Ghazali said, I did not find anything, even in the books. So meaning that Imam Ghazali did his homework, reading all the literature pertaining to philosophy and kalam at the time, and he couldn't find anything related to philosophy. Even though the people of kalam refuted the philosophies, the inconsistencies, the misconceptions that were circulating around the Muslim society at the time, the majority Muslim society, the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. إلا كلمات معقدة. Yeah, I have found some, but very complex. مبددة ظاهرة التناقض والفساد. Even what I have found in the books, in the writings of the Kalamis, were so difficult to understand, were so complex, understand, and not only it was so complex and full of ambiguity, it was full of ambiguity, but also it had inconsistencies in it, contradictions in it, falsehood also in it. he said falsehood al-fasad. So Imam al-Ghazali is saying, okay, even what I found that was supposed to be statements of philosophers, of philosophical statements, of philosophical principles, in the writings of the Kalam, of the people of Kalam, were full of ambiguity, inconsistencies, policies, contradictions, and falsehood. It had nothing to do with what the principles of the philosophers. Understand? أيوة إلا كلمات حيث اشتغلوا بالرد عليهم ولم يكن في كتب إلا كلمات معقدة مبددة ظاهرة التناقض والفساد, which was clearly false and inconsistent, and clearly false and inconsistent and complex. لا يظن لا يظن الاغترار به أو لا يظن الاغترار بها بعاقل عامي فضلا عن من يدعي دقائق العلم. Okay, we're saying even a simple, a layman who is not a scholar wouldn't be impressed by what is in the book, let alone someone knowledgeable, a scholar. So what was in the book was not really interesting at all. It was not impressive. It was full of ambiguity, full of inconsistencies and full of contradiction, so much so that a layman, even when they read it, they wouldn't even be impressed, by it, let alone a scholar. So Imam al-Ghazali was, criticizing the lack of interest in philosophy. فعلمت then I knew that أن الرد المذهبي so أن الرد المذهبي قبل فهمه والاطلاع على كنهه رمي في عماية. So I knew, and this is a rule, this is a golden rule. Imam al-Ghazali said here, فعلمت, then I knew so deeply, أن الرد المذهب, and to refute a school of thought, or to, in this context, a philosophical school of thought, قبل فهمه, before we understand it fully, والاطلاع على كنهه, and before we know it deeply, we know it substantially, رمي في عماية. So it's a refutation that is based on ignorance, on sheer ignorance. So Imam al-Ghazali, in a way, wanted to say that even the Kalamis, yes, they have refuted, if you find in their book some sort of, traces related to philosophy, but they were so esoteric, very complicated, and also very ambiguous and full of, fallacies and inconsistencies and even falsehood, meaning that the people of Kalam may have even attributed something to the philosophy which is not true at all. So look at Imam, look at this, subhanallah. Until today, I can't understand why Imam al-Ghazali is treated in academia, especially in the Western academia, as someone who, in a way, undermine philosophy. and critical thinking. This is, this is beyond me. I can't understand it. It's really and Imam al-Ghazali is saying it here. He stated it. This is Imam al-Ghazali saying it. It's not me, we're interpreting. It's clear that this is its statement. Uh, uh, you know, I hope these statements have not, escaped them. It's clear, it's there, and Imam al-Ghazali is, saying it, and saying that Imam al-Ghazali is so critical to philosophy is over exaggerated, I guess so. This is some sort of essentialism, uh, which is supposed not to be in academia, Yeah, if we were to be fair and to give justice to Imam Ghazali, he was seeing that at, at his time, philosophy was not known to people. It was ambiguous. Even the one that is there was ambiguous, meaning the literature review that was then, written mostly by the Kalamis were full of fallacies and contradictions. So uh, this is where Imam al-Ghazali comes in handy, elaborating on that, writing a full exposition on maqasid, on the objectives of the philosophies, defining philosophy, categorizing philosophy into branches, and streaming through philosophy and assessing philosophy, taking what is good from what is not good, what can be beneficial from what is not beneficial, doing all this. On top of that, he is accused of, undermining philosophy and critical thinking in the Muslim society. That is beyond me. I can't understand this. So Imam al-Ghazali still in the context of elaborating on philosophy. So he said, "Fashammartu." When I deeply knew that in order for you to refute a school of thought, and for this matter, a philosophical, school of thought, like Aristotelian one, you really need to read a lot. You really need to understand, not only read. You need to grasp. You need to have a command, of that particular discipline, philosophy. Otherwise, you will showing your ignorance. You will revealing your ignorance. And Imam al-Ghazali, because he didn't want to show that, as the Kalamists did, so he said, فَشَمَّرْتُ عَنْ سَاقِ الْجِدْ. Then I, this is an expression in Arabic, meaning then I got motivated. I got motivated and I started, في تحصيل ذلك العلم من الكتب. Then I started, seeking what knowledge, from books. I start doing research about philosophy and reading literature here and there in order to, to obtain the gist of it. بمجرد المطالعة فشمرت عن ساق الجلد في تحصيل ذلك العلم من الكتب بمجرد المطالعة بغير استعانة بأستاذ. But Imam Ghazali here also, he wanted to be fair. He said that I read this literature book without any help from any ustad. So meaning it's a self kind of reading. This is autodidact kind of thing. And that was very famous at the time. Yeah. So he said that I read philosophy by myself with no help whatsoever from anyone. وأقبلت على ذلك في أوقات فراغي. And I did so in my free time. من التصنيف والتدريس في العلوم الشرعية. And I did so, it was not a primary thing, but I did so in my free time when I got free from, from writing, and teaching Sharia or Sharia related subjects. When I got free from that, then I will start, reading on philosophy. وأنا ممنوع بالتدريس والإفادة لي 300 نفس. At a time, I was concerned with teaching 300 students. Subhanallah. Look how busy he was teaching 300 students. Despite all that, despite his very busy schedule, Imam al-Ghazali would set free time to study and read philosophy. Yeah. So in Baghdad, that was in Baghdad. Of course, Imam al-Ghazali was at the time in Baghdad. The Madrasa Nizamiya, one of the most, famous and celebrated institutions at the time. And he was the chief of it. Imam al-Ghazali was chief scholar, distinguished professor, we may call it today, at a time in Baghdad, and he was so busy, with students coming here and there, 300 students at that time. And despite that, he would find set free time in order to concern himself with philosophy. And that shows how philosophy was so important, in his schedule, because he found that in order for you to refute the philosophers, you first need to read about them, and not only read about them, but in a way have a very solid grasp of the subject, and have some sort of command and authority and become an authority in the subject. Then you can start criticizing. So despite his scheduled time, he found free time in order to study philosophy. فأطلعني الله سبحانه وتعالى بمجرد المطالعة في هذه الأوقات المختلسة على منتهى علومهم في أقل من سنتين. Allah. And he said, I was able to reach, the high objective of that science. I was able to become, an authority in that science, only during these free times that I use to do research and study this philosophy. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed me and granted me understanding of this science في أقل من سنتين, in less than 2 years. Maybe Imam al-Ghazali understood philosophy and read philosophy and did research about philosophy and reached a very high level in philosophy, a level where he was equal to the most knowledgeable at the time in philosophy, in less than 2 years, knowing that he was only concerning himself with philosophy during his free time. Subhanallah. ثم لم أزل أواظب على التفكير فيه بعد فهمه قريبا من سنة. أعاوده وأردده وأتفقد قوائله وأغواره حتى اطلعت على موقف. Then he said, after reading and having initial grasp of it in less than 2 years, that I continued to contemplate on it, do research on it, and revise it, and study deeply its problems and intricacies. On top of the 2 years, I did this 1 year, meaning after reading it and after understanding it initially in less than 2 years, Imam al-Ghazali spent also another year in revising it, contemplating in it, you know, uh, you know, uh, analyzing it and getting deeply into it and into its intricacies. حتى اطلعت على ما فيه من خداع till I got to know the misconceptional aspect of it. Understand the deceptional aspect of philosophy. على ما فيه حتى اطلعت على ما فيه من خداع وتلبيس وتحقيق وتخيل. Until I got to know what is deceptional from what is not, what is misconception, talbis. So what is deception, what is misconception, and what tahqiq, and what is true, and what is truth, what takhil, and what is imagination, what is a mere imagination. اطلاعا لم أشك فيه. So I found it, after that year I spent contemplating on it, revising it, reading it again, reconstructing it, getting into its intricacies. So after doing all these for a year, I came across, its conception, its deceptions, the deception that is in it, and also I came across the misconception surrounding it, and also some truth in it in philosophy. Look how fair Imam al-Ghazali said there is some truth in philosophy, but also we have some misconceptions, and also some deceptions, and also some imagination. So I knew it very firmly. اطلاعا لم أشك فيه. فاسمع الآن حكايته. نعم. وحكاية حاصل علومهم. Then now listen to, now فاسمع الآن حكايته. So now listen to their story, their narrative. What is the philosophical narrative? So now he's going to tell us what is philosophy is all about. So فاسمع الآن حكايته. Listen to their story. Listen to the philosophy. Okay. وحكاية حاصل علومهم, and the objective of their sciences. فإني رأيتهم أصنافا. So I have seen them in categories, in groups. So Imam Ghazali here is not putting all philosophies in one basket. So now philosophers in one basket. He is dividing philosophies into groups, into categories. He is classifying philosophers. So this is Imam al-Ghazali's classification of the philosopher, or philosophy in general, or the sciences, or the branches of philosophy. وَرَأَيْتُ عُلُومَهُمْ أَقْسَامًا. So he said that philosophies are groups, not one. وَرَأَيْتُ عُلُومَ, and also the branches of philosophies are also, can be categorized into groups, can be classified into categories. وهم على كثرة أصنافهم يلزمهم وسمة الكفر والإلحاد. So despite the fact of the groups, despite of all these groups of philosophers, all these categories that are there, يلزمهم وسمة الكفر والإلحاد. Philosophy is replete with kufr and ilhad, atheism. When you read all schools of philosophy, all school of philosophy, it all boils down to, to two things, kufr and ilhad, atheism. وإن كان بين القدماء منهم والأقدمين وبين الأواخر منهم والأوائل تفاوت عظيم. But he would say that between the ancient philosophers and those and the predecessors, you have the ancient philosophers and those who preceded them and the predecessors of those ancient philosophers, you will find, of course, some kind of frequencies in the level of kufr and ilhad, So the kufr of ilhad is in their writings and in their statement is not the same. The level of ilhad, the level of atheism and kufr is not one, it is fluctuating. Understand? في البعد عن الحق والقرب منه. So some of them are, some of their statements, some of the philosophical principles are close to the truth and some are far away from the truth. So this is Imam al-Ghazali's, of course, here Imam al-Ghazali is going to talk about Asnaf al-Falsafa. He's going to talk about the categories of philosophy, the branches of philosophy. Yeah. And also is going to highlight on the fact that, most of this school of thoughts and philosophy, this philosophical school of thought, are, mostly known and categorized by kufr. Yeah, by kufr. Then he started talking, اعلم أنهم على كثرة فراقهم, despite of the fact that they are, many sects, there are many philosophical sects, واختلاف مذاهبهم, despite the differences in school of thought, despite all these, ينقسمون إلى ثلاثة أقسام. So philosophers can be divided into three categories, into three main categories. الدهريون, Dahriyun basically are atheists, atheists, materialist atheists. Yeah. والطبيعيون, طبيعيون are naturalists. والإلهيون metaphysics. Yeah. So he said that philosophy is in two branches, basically atheism and materialism, materialism or atheistic materialism. والطبيعيون and naturalism, and ilahiyun and metaphysics. So he's got problem with, these probably three, especially al-ilahiyun. But here tabi'iyun, naturalism, or maybe probably what he means here, the natural or the physical world, So he's going to talk about physics, in this context. So now he will start one by one talking about category number one, then category number two, and so on and so forth. So to sum it up all for today, Imam al-Ghazali, having pointed out that the seekers of the truth in the Muslim society at the time is categorized and classified into four, namely the people of Kalam, then the Batinites, then the philosophers, and then the Sufis. So he started with the people of Kalam, the Kalami-based school of thought, and he defined Kalam and defined the objectives of Kalam, which we touched upon. The objective is Kalam, as Imam Ghazali put it very clearly, is to defend and protect the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, to argue for the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah against all the misconceptions, the fallacies, the inconsistencies, that existed at that time. So that was the primary task of a kalami. A kalami is someone who was there to defend the aqidah of Sunnah wal Jama'ah, by way of some logic and by way of the Quranic logic, because kalam is based on Quran and Sunnah. Yeah, it's a unique way of defending Islam. Yeah. After elaborating on, ilm al-kalam and the kalamis and their approaches, he started talking about philosophy and the branches of philosophy. And the most important, thing that we learned today, he started with today talking about philosophy in general, is highlighting the fact that before we criticize any discipline, before we venture into criticizing any discipline, we have to be well aware of it, not only well aware of it, but become an authority in that discipline, before we can even think about criticizing that discipline. And Imam al-Ghazali is referring to philosophy. He said that before, and he was in a way criticizing the Kalami, the people of Kalam, having elaborated enough in their books, philosophy enough, in a very clear manner. Yet he said that he found some statement related to philosophy, but very ambiguous, weak, and full of inconsistencies and falsehood. So that some of the statements brought about by the Kalamis, by the people of Kalam, were not true, were false. So here Imam Ghazali, in a way, saying that they did not do justice to the philosophers. So, and Imam Ghazali, says, most importantly, that before we even think about criticizing, addressing certain ideology or anything in any discipline, we have to read about that thing first, be good at it, not only good, be an authority in it, as he did with Maqasid al-Falasifa, and then, refuted them. He refuted them after he has, in a way, read, deeply about them. Yeah. So he said, and he, exerted his efforts and time, reading about philosophy after knowing that in order for me to criticize philosophy, yes, you may see some fallacies, but you can't just refute these fallacies and inconsistencies before you really go deep into reading it. So he read about it, and he read about philosophy through the literature that was made available at that time. And he came to the conclusion that, philosophy, is replete with some sort of falsehood after reading it so deeply. So now he's going to elaborate, to explain to us the categories of philosophy, the branches of philosophy, and also the groups of philosophy. So starting with the Dahriyun, the atheist materialist, the physicist, let's say the naturalist, and then the metaphysics. So inshallah, next time we are going to touch upon all these philosophical schools of thought, as Imam al-Ghazali classified them here. وهذا الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So we're stopping here, inshallah. Yeah.
Thank you so
Sheikh.
much. Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jazakumullah khairan, Ustaz.
Wa iyyakum. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Yalla. Salam.